the Hogsty with your crew, Alex Zeese, Steve Thomas, and Robbie Duncan.
We want to welcome back to our show a longtime Redskins reporter. He's a TV analyst, a writer, and an author. Rich Tandler of CSN and of RealRedskins.com. Rich, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming back on. Well, we want to get into, obviously, the big third preseason game. Also, the biggest news, I think, of the week, really, is the Brian Stork trade. And now he said on Twitter this morning he's ready to come play for the Redskins, but there was a lot of drama to him coming here. He threatened to retire, and then now he's all in. But all this unfolded in like 2 hours over social media. How tough is that for you now as a reporter who, you were around way before Twitter and all this? How hard is that to adjust to?
Yeah, it's kind of, people are looking at things and something published 20 minutes ago can all of a sudden be outdated information. And, it's just, I certainly, as both a writer and consumer of news in this arena, I feel for it, because all of a sudden, you're constantly talking about one thing and how Brian Stork's going to fit into the depth chart and yada, yada, yada. And then it's like, wait a minute, he might not even come to the team. So, and I think it's kind of, it's both created by social media and that's affected by it, because I don't think anybody would necessarily have heard that Stork was considering retiring if not for the instant 24-hour news cycle. The news would have come up in the paper the next morning, and he would have been, by that time, I believe he'd pretty much come around to, well, he could retire and pay back about $250,000 in signing bonus, or he could play for the Redskins. So, kind of whether he liked it or not. And sometimes guys just take some time to adjust to these things. It's not easy getting traded. And again, I think the instant reaction kind of feeds the whole thing.
Steve?
Yeah, oh, sorry. We had a little technical problem there. Well, Rich, how do the Redskins view Stork in terms of depth chart? Because the fans, you see it. The fans have already got Corey Lichtensteiger and Josh Laribas, 1 foot out the door.
Yeah, well, I think starting at the other end, I think Laribas was probably out the door anyway. I think they were going to have Spencer Long as the backup center, whether he started at left guard or not. I think he was going to be the backup center if anything happened to Lichtensteiger. But the opportunity for Stork came up, and they grabbed it. I think against the Steelers on September 12th, I think the starter will be Corey Lichtensteiger. He will be on the roster week 1. Therefore, his salary, which isn't really high, it's in the $3 million range, which isn't nothing, but it's not a huge salary if he does end up being a reserve. I think week 1, it'll be Lichtensteiger, maybe into October, and then assuming that he gets a fair shot, I think at some point in October that Brian Stork will end up being the starting center and Lichtensteiger will go to the bench.
Well, let me ask you this too, Rich. What they are kind of leading us to believe was this trade was more so just like a guarantee that we would get him on the team instead of just letting him hit the free agency and letting other teams bid for him. Is that basically how Scott was going about this? Just to, basically, I guess, first dibs type thing?
Well, technically, he would not. He would have had to go through waivers first, starting with the team that had, basically going draft order.
Okay,
with the
gotcha.
worst team getting first claim, so there would have had to been, however many, 20 some odd teams, 21 teams, I think, would have a chance at Stork before the Redskins would. So I just think they kind of figured it was worth a 7th-round pick to jump to the front of the line.
Now, the trade was, as we understood it, was technically a conditional 7th-round pick. What's the condition?
I haven't heard, but usually 99% of the time it's just conditional on him making that initial 53-man roster. Maybe he has to last a few weeks, but I don't think the Patriots would necessarily, do that, go through that. I think they would go just straight. If he's on that 53-man roster next Saturday, it's a 7th-round pick.
Yeah, and now I think the important thing that came out of the third game were the injuries. We had Kerrigan, we had with his groin, we had Marshall with an elbow, Quentin Dunbar had an ankle, Morgan Moses had an ankle. What can you tell us about the status of the injuries right now?
Let's see. Now, Marshall, that's probably I don't. My guess is that's the most serious. No word came out yesterday on his MRI. So we're going to kind of wait and see how that develops. Now, I'm not 100% sure he was going to be on the 53-man roster anyway after the way Robert Kelly performed against the Jets, but we're waiting to see on that. Kerrigan, there are no concerns. I mean, he may not practice this week, but this week is really, in practice terms, is more about getting the third and fourth string ready to play against the Bucs. He wasn't even going to dress for that game. So, come when they start preparation for the Steelers a week from tomorrow, probably, or maybe a week from Tuesday, since it's a Monday night game. When they start that, I'm pretty sure Kerrigan will be on the field. Probably the same with Moses and with Dunbar. Dunbar was a shin bruise, which is painful. Yeah, which is pain. That's what Jay said right after the game, which I'm sure is painful and is black and blue and not very comfortable to walk on. But I think probably I tell you what, Kerrigan, Moses, and Dunbar. If there was a game this coming Sunday, they'd probably all three be suiting up.
Well, Dunbar's a tough guy. I mean, didn't he last year break a finger or something and resetted himself and run back out on the field? I mean, his finger was pointing in a very unnatural direction there. Yeah, he popped it back in. So, I mean, all these guys are like that. I don't want to just say Dunbar is particularly tough. I mean, these guys routinely play with injuries that would have you or me, lying on the couch yelling for mama to come help us. So, but yeah, I think they'd all three be out there. Marshall's another story. Not sure about him.
Well, I mean, I think anybody with who bangs their shin on something can attest to how painful it can be to bruise or hurt your shin.
Oh yeah.
But and in the injury thing, I forgot to ask about Crowder. By the way, Crowder didn't play on against the Bills. What's Crowder's status?
We will see. He's another one who will not, wasn't going to play against the Bucs anyway. So the thing you have to keep in mind, and really about all these injuries, we're just going off of what the team has told us, with the exception of Kerrigan had the MRI on his groin, and there were reports that, kind of independent report that was okay. But the team Jay Gruden doesn't have to really tell us anything about injuries if he doesn't want to during the preseason. They don't have to tell the truth. Let's see. Since they're playing a Monday night game, it'll be that Thursday before the Monday night game, before an injury report comes out that will say who's really injured, who's practicing, who's not practicing due to injury.
Got it.
So, yeah, but Crowder, it was just a little bit of a sore knee. Again, I'm fairly confident that it had been a regular season Thursday night game the other day that Crowder would have been in there.
Well, let's move on to the running backs real quick. Obviously, Robert Kelly did a really good job against the Jets, and then the other night against the Bills. And even Mac Brown had a really good night against the Bills too. How do you think that depth chart's going to shape up, or even for the 53-man roster? I mean, you got Jones obviously and Thompson. Do you think they? And Kelly's pretty much a lock too. But do you think they throw in Mac Brown as the fourth running back since they don't have a fullback, or what do you think how that's going to play out?
I think they'll either have an extra running back or an extra tight end to kind of be take that fullback fullback position. So, it just a lot just depends on how Marshall's doing. Again, I'm not, I think they really wanted. I wrote this a few times. I think they really would like to keep him. He has the speed. He showed some ability in practice in Richmond. Just like a rookie, he needs to. He still has a lot to learn. But whether they can or not, how the numbers are and how that elbow is, we just don't know. Of course, getting injured was probably a reason why he wasn't an All-American and drafted much higher coming out of Georgia. That's something that, particularly with him, raises flags that, hey, we have to be careful about putting this guy in a position where we have to rely on him.
So what you're seeing is kind of it's going to be Brown versus Logan Paulson or someone like that to kind of get that last spot.
Exactly. Yeah. You kind of It's hard. In fans and media, we kind of think of it. I guess you'd say kind of a vertical depth chart where you have the two guys at the bottom and they're competing for that last spot. Where coaches look at it more horizontally. And say, you've got the tight end, or possibly versus the third quarterback, depending on how you're, on how things are going. So they look at it more that way about the 53 spots instead of X number at this position.
Well, and another thing that drives me nuts, and I see this in the media too. No one ever accounts for anyone on special teams when they do their 53. Like they put punter, kicker, snapper, but those other spots, you have to account for those as well.
Yeah, that's usually where the surprises come from.
Right.
And that's why DeShazer Everett, even though you look at, he's probably the fifth safety, and the conventional thinking is that they can only keep 4. They might find a way to shoehorn him onto the roster. Maybe at the expense of another defensive lineman who, maybe can't contribute much on special teams. Or they can go over to offense, maybe at the expense of the third quarterback to keep it to Shazer Everett for special teams purposes. So that is correct. That's usually where, when you're kind of scratching your head figuring out how did this guy make it, it's usually because of special teams.
I'd like to go back to running back real fast. Rob Kelly, in my amateur, non-expert opinion, really looked pretty good against the Bills. How solid is Jones at the number 1 spot? Jones hasn't exactly wowed us. It seems to me he's more potential than production at this point.
Well, you look at last year, he did show that, he can do some things. He has some NFL starting running back skills. He has speed. He has some size. There were a couple of times where he caught those passes, screen passes, and really just impressed, just separating from the defense, rumbling down the field. But then too often he would just go and run into somebody or, just not pick the right hole or, or miss a block on occasion when he had to do pass pickup. So he has a lot to learn, but so does Robert Kelly. I think, Matt Jones is going to be the week 1 starter. They really kind of have a lot invested in him, not so much in terms of money or a third round pick's a moderate investment, but they just have a lot of invested in terms of time. And they really spent a lot of time with him, getting him to hold on to the ball better, trying to get him to pick his spots better, run with proper pad level, so on down the line. So I think he is going to be I don't think there's any question he's going to be the guy. Now, if you want to talk about October, November, if he's not getting it done and Robert Kelly looks like he can go, I don't think they'll hesitate to if not start Kelly, at least have him in there on a heavy rotation. I think right now the vision is for less of a running back by committee with Jones really carrying the load. It could shift to more of a running back by committee with Kelly and maybe even Chris Thompson getting a few carries here and there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to kind of address the outside linebacker depth right now. Besides Trent Murphy, who made the switch from D-line or to outside linebacker to D-line and back to outside linebacker, and Houston Bates, how confident are they in the guys they have on there, and who do you think of the rest has the chance to make the roster, if they will carry more than 4 outside linebackers?
Yeah, I don't think they'll carry more than 4 because I think they're going to want to carry 6 on the inside if you count Su'a Cravens as an inside linebacker, which is what he's been playing. So, but again, is what we talked about a couple of minutes ago, where the coaches don't really care what is next to his name, how he fits on the roster. But so I think they'll go with 4. Bates could be the 4th. Lyndon Trail, who was on the practice squad last year, kind of an interesting story. He was a tight end, I believe, for a while. Now he's an outside linebacker, huge guy, but he still has a lot to learn. I think he could have a shot at Houston Bates spot, but it is no question a thin position behind Ryan Kerrigan and Preston Smith, who could be one of the better sets of starters in the league. Behind that, but it's like most other premium positions, like quarterback almost. Not if almost any team loses their starting edge rusher, they're going to be scrambling to find a replacement. Not too many guys have a double-digit sack guy on the bench ready to jump up and go in there. So, they're just going to have to live it. Kerrigan usually stays healthy. Preston Smith, we don't know. Obviously, he made it through last season on playing about 50-60% of the snaps. He made it through last season without missing a beat. So I think the hope is that they'll continue that and stay healthy.
Well, as long as we're on the topic, we've got Junior Galette, who's on the reserve non-football injury list. Number 1, does he stay on that list, or does he go to IR at some point when the season starts? And number 2, and more importantly, how big of a loss do the coaches view that? Because Kerrigan, or Galette rather, seemed to be a sort of an elite pass rushing specialist.
Yeah, well, to answer the first question, I'm not sure. I think he'll just stay on NFI, since it was not it did not happen. Obviously he was training for football, but it wasn't any kind of team sanctioned place. And on that list, they can choose to pay him all of his salary, part of his salary, or none of it. Technically, they don't have to pay him. I think that they will pay him at least part. He had an incentive-laden thing. Incentive-laden deal. I don't think it would kill them to pay him, at least the league minimum to keep him, keep him happy. So, and then we'll start the whole contract thing again next year, probably with another incentive-laden thing, assuming he does want to stay around here. But yeah, I think the coaches, they were unhappy. They were kind of bummed to begin with, but at this point, they move on very quickly. They're not waking up in the morning saying, "Oh," Joe Barry isn't waking up going, "Oh, woe is me. I sure wish I had Junior Galette." He's moved on trying to coach the next guys up, and that's just the way. Galette was an undrafted free agent. He was just kind of a guy who came out of nowhere and had a couple of good years for the Saints. So, they're hoping they can find that next undrafted Junior Galette. Whether it's Houston Bates, whether it's Lyndon Trail, whether it's somebody they could possibly try to claim somebody off of waivers. Although, again, a good edge rusher isn't going to hit the waiver wire very often.
Yeah. Speaking of those undrafteds, real quick, last year we kind of seemed to luck into quite a few of them. A few guys who somehow made the roster and really made an impact. Going back to Dunbar, he's one of them. Do you see anybody this year? I mean, you've been at camp. I know because I saw you there when I was at Fan Appreciation Day with your stool and, in the 200-degree heat. But has anyone stood out to you in camps and stuff as like an undrafted guy who can make this roster?
I don't think so. But what you have to remember at Dunbar, is that, well, he switched positions, obviously.
Right.
But he was cut originally. He went on the practice squad, and then around mid-season when they needed help at cornerback and they thought he was ready, that's when they brought him up. So I think that's when you can see the guys like, Jacoby Cofield was an undrafted guy last year. It's hard to see him making the 53 initially, but if he's on the practice squad, offensive tackle, he could make it up. Anthony Lanier. Hey, if you want to say one guy has an outside shot, if they decide, which I don't think they will, but I won't rule it out, they decide to move on from Stephen Paya on the defensive line, they really like Lanier a lot. So if you want one name there of an undrafted rookie from this year's class who has a shot to make the initial 53, I'll go with him. But if they do waive him and he gets on the practice squad, I think you could see him at some point during the season like you did with Dunbar.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, it's funny you mentioned Paya because Paya's got a big contract and he really has kind of underperformed, I think, so far, in my opinion at least. But I'd like to go to tight end
Kind
real
of.
fast.
No, I think he's definitely underperformed. I don't think you have to be too soft with your words there.
Well, Steve likes to be humble because, unlike you, we're just, we're not experts. So we try.
We're
Steve and I
faking
try
it.
to
We're
be
faking
humble
it. We're faking
Okay.
it. But let's go to tight end real fast because I think Vernon Davis has been everything that the team really wanted him to be so far. And so we've really got a situation where it seems to me we have a bunch of quality tight ends and not enough roster spots. What is the tight end depth chart behind Jordan Reed?
I think it goes Vernon Davis. I think, and I think that if Reed should happen to get injured, which, he could, and hopefully if he does, it's for like last year, just for a relatively short period of time. I think he missed 2 games last year. But I think Davis would more step into his role. And you got Niles Paul, I think, who is a third tight end, special teams guy. He's the gunner on the special teams. Wouldn't surprise me if he ended up being the special teams captain. And then Logan Paulson, who has not played badly. He's actually caught a few passes and made a few plays out there. Excuse me, but he his fate will depend on if they think they need to or even can keep 4 tight ends on the roster. Now, they did that with Shanahan's last year, a couple of years ago, with Paul Paulson, Fred Davis, and Jordan Reed. So, it can be done if you think you need them, but you don't just want to keep the guy around just because he can do some things. He really has to fill a need.
I didn't mean to snicker at the thought of Fred Davis. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Well, one thing I've been pointing
out now.
He's making rap videos. Remember?
Yeah.
Oh, is he?
Oh, that's right.
That seems that sounds about right for him.
Yeah. Yep. No further comment on that.
Yeah. Well, at this point, besides maybe someone, putting in a huge game in the 4th preseason, I think it's pretty safe to say that the roster is pretty much shaped up. I think coaches kind of have an idea at this point. What do you think there could be any surprise cuts? We kind of mentioned Paya, but is there? I think the inside linebacker depth, especially, there's going to be some cuts there that they may not want to do, but because they're so deep, they have to cut somebody.
We all know who you're talking about, Robbie.
Well, I'm letting Rich.
You can say Terry Riley's name.
Perry Riley and his big contract.
Do you think he's a guy that could maybe even trade?
Nobody's going to. Teams might be interested in Perry Riley, the player. They're not going to be interested in Perry Riley with a $4 million salary.
True.
And unfortunately, that's just a situation where they're going to have to let him go if they don't want to keep him as a reserve. It looks like, you've got Foster and Compton are your starters. Martrell Spate is is probably behind Compton. And then who backs up Mason Foster? It's
Sua?
either going to be, no, Sua, I don't think, I can see him there. He's not a first down base defense kind of back. And I know you only run that about 15% of the time, but he's going to be there more in nickel situations. I don't think at this point anyway, you want teams running at Cravens a lot. He's just not big enough, or anything like that to be effective in that role. But I think it's going to be either Garvin's or Riley or Terrence Garvin. And if you look at experience, you're looking at Perry Riley. If you're looking at a $4 million for a sack up for a backup versus say $750K, I think for Garvin, well, you're going to go with Garvin. So we will see how that works out. I don't know. In a way, I would be surprised if Riley was gone, but it would certainly make sense looking at kind of he's gone from really one of the key guys on defense to almost an afterthought.
Real quick, does Perry Riley do anything on special teams? Because I mean, it's hard for me to track that sometimes. I don't think he even does that, does he?
Yeah, I know he did. I mean, back in 12, 13, 14, I would notice that he would go, he'd play. Hazlitt played his, a lot of his defenders every single snap. They would not even come out for a rep. So he'd be playing 95 to 100% of the defensive snaps, and then another 20 plays on special teams. So I don't know if he did that last year because he was hurt a lot, but he's capable if they want to do that. But then, of course, that's kind of Garvin's specialty.
Right, because I'm assuming that
is very good at that.
I'm assuming that fourth middle linebacker has to be on those units. I mean, so that's why I just thought I'd ask.
Any backup linebacker. I mean, Cravens will be playing him a lot.
Right.
Spade will be playing him a lot. So yeah, any backup linebacker is going to be on special teams, assuming they're active.
Right.
The only draft pick that we haven't really heard anything about is Matt Ioannidis. He's been almost a ghost, it seems like, this whole preseason. What is going on with Matt Ioannidis? Is he just underperforming? Is he a rookie buried on the depth chart? What is it with him?
Yeah, I think more of the latter. He's a rookie buried on the depth chart. I think maybe there were slightly higher expectations for him than warranted. But we'll have to see about him. I would worry more if we're not hearing about him being active, rotating in there on game days in a couple of months by mid-season or so. I think then it might be time to start to say, okay, well, this is kind of a redshirt year for him. We'll look for something out of him next year. So we'll have to see. I mean, he's hustling. He's a smart guy. He was a fifth-round pick. Fifth-round picks sometimes do not play at all or play very sparingly. So let's get the expectations in line there. The emergence of Ziggy Hood is really the main thing that has made it so they don't have to rely on him maybe a little bit more.
Right.
I think we'd be remiss also, as long as we're talking about draft picks and not asking about Josh Doxson. This is the guy who's been day-to-day for, it seems like, 2 months now. Does the team really have a realistic hope that he's going to produce at some point this year at this point?
Oh, sure. I mean, maybe, not week 1, maybe not week 2, but, he does seem to be ramping back up. As long as he doesn't have a setback.
Right.
And, which is what they've been fearful of, which is why he's been kind of, they've really been bringing him along slowly. But he seems to be ramping up his activities. You always keep, people have talked about the pup list for him a lot. You always keep, you have 6 receivers on the roster. One of them is always in active game days. So he can be that guy for the first 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks of the season if you need to. At least he can practice. At least if he's on the pup list, he can't even go out on the practice field while the team is there. So, you don't want to do that, but just get, and I think, when you're in, when you're getting later in the season and guys are getting a little banged up, he'd be a good guy to have in. in the red zone in packages. Maybe they'll only catch 20 or 25 passes for a few touchdowns, but at least he'll get out there, see what it's like, help you out some, and then be ready for next year, assuming either Garcon and or Jackson have left as free agents.
Well, we really appreciate your time, Rich. I got one last follow-up, or not follow-up, but one last question for you. We're going to kind of go outside of the Redskins for a second. Big news from Dallas is Tony Romo's out like 6 to 10 weeks for his back being re-injured again. Should Redskin fans be, should they be happy that they're now going to be facing Dak Prescott, or a little worried because he's been kind of lighting up the preseason?
Well, I would just caution about being happy about any injuries, just because of a thing called karma.
Well, yeah.
We'll come back.
Good point.
When you start celebrating other teams' injuries, you know what's coming next for your team. So, anyway, but besides that, I think Prescott, it'll be interesting. Maybe if they're playing week 4, week 5, when you got a little bit more film on Prescott, see what he really does, against when, Dallas is using a game plan, when other teams are using a game plan, see how he reacts. I think I'd rather have a little bit more film on him. I might actually rather have faced Tony Romo in week 2.
Yeah.
But also I think though in over but he'll probably miss 5. I guess you minus a week because there's no game, so he'll miss 5, 6, 7 games, something like that. And I do think over that stretch of games, that Dallas will have fewer wins because they don't have Romo. So, kind of in the long term in the division race, it's probably better that the Cowboys are playing Prescott, because I think I think he'll get figured out to at least to some extent. So, for week 2, it might not be all that good, but I think in big picture, it's probably better for the Redskins if Prescott is in there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when do you think enough is going to be enough for Romo? I mean, each year, the past 3 years, he's hurt his back in a major way. I mean, a back's nothing to mess around with. Do you think this could be it, or do you think Romo's going to?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's kind of too early to answer that. I don't think, with another general manager / owner, I might say that they might want him to retire, but Jones just seems to be so, I don't know, they kind of treat injuries differently than everybody.
That's
maybe
true.
they shouldn't have brought him back last year with the collarbone.
I mean, at this
Maybe
point,
they'd given him.
I feel like he's going to be in a wheelchair or something in a year. It's getting ridiculous.
Yeah, and there's a lot of money involved in that. I think I heard that if they'd moved on from him this year, it would have been $32 million in dead cap. They move on him next year, $20 million in dead cap. So, that always complicates the picture as far as what Jerry Jones is going to try to persuade him to do. But, I mean, that'll be, obviously that's going to be a big story to keep an eye on. If I had to bet now if he's going to play in 2017, I would say yes. Mm-hmm. But, it's certainly not a sure thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, Rich, we want to really thank you for coming on the show. By the way, when I was doing my research to write a quick intro for you, I noticed you have a book on Amazon from about 6 years ago. Are you working on anything big like that right now, or?
No, I'm maybe if that was a history of the Redskins that I put out, and I don't know, maybe if they hit a Super Bowl or something, I'll update it.
Cash in a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Might as well. Everybody else does.
No. I realize you guys kind of get it at the bottom, but again, we know you're real busy. It's the start of the season, so we want to thank you for coming on. Everyone, make sure you give Rich a follow. It's Rich_Tandler CSN on Twitter and RealRedskins.com.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys.
Did I miss anything?
Awesome. Thank you, Rich.
Thanks.
No, I think you hit it. I appreciate it.
All right, great. Rich, thank you very much.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Well, guys, I think that was a great interview with Rich. Any real thoughts on that, or should we just dive right into our breakdown of the Bills game?
Just glad to have him on again. It's awesome to have an insider to get some good info from. So we appreciate his time with us.
Yeah,
and
he's
I know,
a
Steve,
real.
You
He's
love
the
arguing
ultimate
with
insider.
Rich on Twitter, Rich and Rick Snyder at the same time. So
I don't know if I'm arguing with them. I mean, I do ping them for questions and stuff we have because I know that they're the ones that are probably going to answer us.
sure.
I know I appreciate his input.
Yeah.
He's kind of the ultimate insider. He had a ton of good info in there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I agree. I think we
The only thing I'd point out about
with those guys.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I think the only thing that I'd like to point out about what he said was he really sort of tempered expectations about Brian Stork.
Mm-hmm.
Because the fans are just like ready for Lichtensteiger to be gone. They want to tar and feather, Josh Laribus, and they're expecting Stork to come in here and be like the panacea to the interior offensive line problems. And Tandler kind of put the kibosh on that to a certain extent, I thought.
I think you're right. Well,
And that's why he's paid the big bucks.
Yeah. Well, and that's why he gets to be on, CSN with Larry Michael every week, and we do a podcast.
Exactly.
All right. Well, let's get into the Bills game. I got an opening question for you guys. Rex Ryan sat most of his defense and pulled his offensive starters. Like 3 series in before the
Tyrod
end
Taylor did two series.
Yeah, 2 series before the end of the first quarter. Even is this him reacting to what everyone else did in week 2? By resting a lot of starters and him being like, look how smart I am. I'm going to do it week 3.
I don't think you can ever predict what Rex Ryan's going to do. I mean, that guy marches to the beat of his own drummer. I don't know if I care a whole lot what the Bills are doing, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I think he more marches to the beat of like a guy with a slide whistle, but that's just me.
Boom, 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 boom. No, but it is what it is. It's preseason. Looks like coaches just aren't taking it as seriously as they used to.
Sure.
I mean, even a lot of our defensive starters didn't play that much into the. At the end of the first half, there were some switches that were made. I mean, so it's not like Gruden kept our starters in for a while. I mean, Kirk stayed in for pretty much the whole half.
Right.
But it is what it is. They want to get these back end guys more experience too, and that's preseason's the best way to do it.
Well, that and Gruden saw 2 starters go down in the first quarter, and Kerrigan and Moses. That probably freaked him out to a certain extent about injuries. Sure. He probably said, "Okay, enough's enough,"
Yeah.
I like to ask you guys what everybody thought about how the offense performed, because the first quarter they looked really bad.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like they were completely out of sync. Looked like they hadn't played in forever. And by the end of the half, though, they looked really like they're almost in mid-season form. And I think that's why they didn't start the third quarter, because they looked so good. So, I mean, Robbie in particular, what were your thoughts about the offense?
Yeah, it was just very sloppy. I mean, the penalties are just unbelievable. We have to clean that up, or it's amazing that we were able to overcome them in the second quarter. But God, I mean, all these holding calls. Mm-hmm. Lichtensteiger got 3 penalties on him.
That's got to be some kind of record, or 3 penalties on one offensive lineman in 2 quarters.
I mean, good Lord.
Well,
they were able to overcome it, like I said, but that they definitely were kind of just like, I guess, warming up and kind of shaking the rust off a little bit.
And by the end of the half, though, I mean, the offense is really clicking. And one thing I thought, Ryan Grant's touchdown, I think, might have been the only time I really remember him looking explosive.
Making I think actual play kind of
thing. Because the guy covering him
off-season in terms of these preseason games, though.
He has, and I think the guy covering him was probably a safety because his number was 41. But he ran away from that guy. And that was the first time I've ever seen Ryan Grant do that. So I think that was a good thing.
And I think that move kind of like cemented his lock on the roster. I mean, a lot of people are, I guess, wishfully thinking that he's not going to be on the team because of Ross and Maurice Harris and blah, blah, blah. But
right.
I mean, Gruden loves Ryan Grant, and Ryan Grant's on the team because of that play and because of, he's a solid depth guy, and he kind of does the dirty work that Gruden loves.
The fact is, we're going to get rid of a good wide receiver at the end of this, 53-man roster thing.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because I really like guys like Ross. I like guys like Ryan Grant. You want to have space on your team for guys who you think can contribute, but you just can't carry 8 wide receivers or whatever it would be.
No.
I think Kendall Thompson and TJ Thorpe are both, quality players. They're just going to be a victim of the numbers game.
Right.
So I think,
Practice
Maurice
squad.
practice squad. But Maurice Harris has got a ton of playing time.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't caught a lot of balls, but he's been out there a lot. So I think we're definitely going to see more than one wide receiver on the practice squad for sure.
Yeah.
I think we'd be remiss. We've talked a little bit about how Kirk was inconsistent, but we'd be remiss in not talking about the running game. We talked about it with Rich to a little bit, to a certain extent, but Rob Kelly looked like a starter to me.
He did.
Yep.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, the real question to me is not just Kelly; it's Brown looked good too.
Brown was getting some big runs in. I mean, Kelly kind of was just getting the dirty yards, but Brown was making some big runs.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah,
impressive.
and of course, I mean, that was against, the Bills, third and fourth stringers, of course.
True.
But Brown has looked better. I mean, it's obvious that a year on the practice squad and year being around the team has helped him because he didn't look that good last year.
No.
Rich kind of shut me down. Rich Tandler just kind of shut me down when I asked him about, whether Jones truly is the first stringer or there's competition. I was hoping he was going to say Kelly might be in the running for the first string, but it sounds like that's not the case. No matter what.
I think it'll all depend on Jones's health, really, if we even keep all 4 that we've talked about. I think it's safe to say with Marshall's injury, he's probably going on the PUP or IR or something before he goes to the practice squad this year because
Marshall hasn't looked good.
Yeah, he hasn't. He is not impressed. Another thing that stood out to me during this game, definitely was a tale of 2 quarters. But when they started clicking, it was who he was throwing to. It was going back to Reed, Deshaun Jackson, and Pierre Garçon. The big 3 receivers from last year. Do you think it's just Kirk being more familiar with those guys, or
Well, they were out there. They were out there on the field.
Yeah.
I mean, Deshaun Reed hadn't been out there at all, and Deshaun and Garçon have barely played in either one of the first 2 games. So I think it was just a function of everybody being on the field that he started going to him.
Yeah, and Reed even showed his rust there too. I mean, he made some pretty uncharacteristic drops before
so did Garçon
things.
too, early on.
Yeah, true, and it happened before things started rolling. But you could see that, not being on the field kind of,
hurt him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you guys were. I know Robbie, you were working. So Steve, I don't know if you were watching our Twitter feed during that first quarter. There was so much absurd panicking. This is why you need to play preseason game 2. And it's like it's still preseason. Friggin' lax, guys.
Well, yeah, and I mean they're wrong to panic, be just ridiculous about it. But
yeah.
I was on that bandwagon last week, if you guys recall during the show. I do think they should have played more, last week to kind of knock the rest off. I think it would have helped.
It might have helped with this game, but I mean, given what we saw in the second quarter, I think the rust got knocked off enough.
Yeah.
So.
It did. Well, Robbie, I'd like to, what I noticed that really stuck out in my head was that I thought, and I'm no expert, I thought Ty Nsekhe looked really bad from the right side, and then he looked like the normal Ty Nsekhe from the left when he rotated over in the third quarter. It looked like he wasn't comfortable from the right side. I remember from his interview with us last year, he said that he thought of himself as a left tackle, and he was still kind of getting used to the right side.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not like he hasn't been playing right side. I mean, even when I was in camp and they went to the O-line, D-line one-on-ones, he would get reps at left tackle after Trent got his rep in, and then he'd even go in at right tackle after Morgan played. So, I mean, he's been the swing tackle. I think he's just you got to be able to, flip the switch and know you got to, your technique is changing, everything is different on the other side for you. So, I mean, I think he's just got to do a better job of being prepared to do that when it comes. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, let's talk about Morgan Moses real quick too.
You've been railing against him on Twitter.
And this isn't a witch hunt. I want him to succeed. I want him to be good for us. He's a young, high potential guy, but there's the thing that I'm ragging on him for I mean, it's so frustrating because it's just such a simple fix, and it's a fix that needs to be done, because if you don't, it's going to lead to plays like he gave up on that what should have been sack. I don't think that was a roughing the passer.
Yeah,
by the way,
I kind of want to talk about that too. I mean, it's getting absurd what's not a sack now. I mean, that was as clean of a hit as you could have, and they called it roughing the passer. But anyway,
yeah, I mean, Morgan, I really, it begs the question: how much can he actually improve on? You know, he made this big jump last year to be our starting right tackle, and he did a lot of good things. But I mean, if you really watch him,
is he regressing?
I don't think he's regressing. I think he's been the same guy. I mean, this grab thing that he does every time. I mean, almost every time he does it. I mean, even last year. I mean, I'm planning on not next week, the week one after the game, to make a cut up of every single time he does it, and I'll show you guys that it's a lot more than you think.
Can you do a little bit of descriptive for the radio audience here, what you're talking about with his arms?
Well, yeah, watch the clip that I posted on Twitter. He's basically, I mean, I've said this before. I've called it the clap before, like he's going for a clap or something.
Coming around instead of up.
Yeah, his arms come around like he's just trying to grab the guy's shoulder pads instead of just striking with his hands inside and elbows, kind of tucked in between your, like on your side, so it's boom, hands are inside when you strike. The strike is so important because it knocks off the pass rusher off his lane, and the other thing too, he's playing too high, and not kind of playing with that inside lean you need to play with, because if you don't, they're going to take that inside rush almost every time. You give them that lane, they're going to take it. So
he's been playing high almost since the day we saw him. He got here.
I mean, look at him in his stance. He is standing a lot taller than everybody else, even Trent. I mean, Trent, his stance is kind of high too, but I mean, Morgan's basically standing straight up with his knees bent.
Well,
basically.
It's like, if you're seeing it, the other O-line experts are seeing it, Bill Callahan is seeing it. I'm wondering why Morgan Moses just can't process this correction, because that's a coaching technique thing. He ought to be able to fix it.
Well, if everybody could fix everything and develop, then there wouldn't, it'd be
everyone
impossible.
Would have the hogs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some players just don't learn or can't be coached right. I mean, Morgan has been. I mean, the same coaches in college teach the same stuff that the pros do. I mean, they go to the clinics, they learn from what the pros are doing, and then they incorporate that into what they coach their offensive linemen in college. So Morgan's been getting the same coaching his entire career, at least through college. So, I mean, I want to say that he is who he is, and that it's not going to get any better. I mean, he's going to be the same guy. I mean, he gets away with it a lot. I mean, he doesn't get beat every time. It's not like this is, like he's going to get beat every time. But
well, I mean, look, this is year 3 for him.
Yeah.
At some point you're right. At some point, these players are what they are. You know.
My question for you, Robbie, would be, are we at a point where, this is who he is? Do you just have to try and coach around his mistakes as best you can if you're Callahan? Are there things you can say?
Secchi.
All right, if you have this issue, let's at least have you do X, Y, Z, so you're not giving up a sack every other play.
I don't know, man. If I was Coach Callahan, I would be so frustrated with him and would be like, I'd be on the verge of just sitting him on the bench until he gets his crap together and start in Secchi, who I honestly believe is a better offensive lineman than Morgan Moses. I said before on Twitter too, Morgan gets a pass because he's younger and he has a higher ceiling, and Secchi's to like 20 pick. And he's a draft pick. Right. And Secchi is 29 years old. He's, a grizzled veteran and basically doesn't have a ceiling anymore. He is who he is too, which is a better offensive lineman at the moment. So
right.
I mean, Morgan's going to get his pass, and I think stay the starter until things get worse, and then we'll talk again.
We'll see Secchi on. It's time, I guess, to do our weekly Spencer Long report, because we've talked about him quite a bit too.
Yeah.
Laval didn't get first string reps that I noticed.
I think he got the first series, didn't he, or no? I might be wrong.
Well, Robbie, tell us.
I don't remember. I think it was Long and Lichtensteiger first, and then Laval and Long at center. But I still think he's better at center. I mean, he's not a true center.
Right.
But, I mean, they even had – or no, that was – never mind. I was going to say Long had the botched snap, but that was Austin Reeder.
That was Reeder, yeah.
But, I think he could be a good stopgap if Brian Stork wasn't here to replace Lichtensteiger. But at this point, I think he's just solid depth. I don't think he's ever going to be a really quality starter for us.
Have you watched film on Stork yet?
Not fully. I've seen bits and pieces. I read Mark Bullock's post on him.
Yeah.
But he's that type of guy you want on as a center and offensive lineman in general. I mean, he's got that same fighter mentality like Brandon Scherf. He's going to punish guys. He's not going to back down. He's not going to he'll do something to if you're kicking his ass, he'll do something to fix that. So he'll play a little dirty to
right.
Make up for it. But
It's kind of clear the direction this O-line is going under McLuhan and Gruden. They want these big nasty, ugly
mean,
maulers.
nasty.
Yeah, and
they really want to play a power game. It
They
seems
do.
to me, and not this, kick slide,
No.
zone
They want to
blocking.
beat you up. That's what they want.
And that's the Scott McLuhan, mentality. He loves that stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
look at
Probably why Tyler Plumbus isn't with the team anymore.
yeah, and Gruden loves it too. I mean, he even said it. He loves angry offensive linemen. So
right.
I'm very excited for him as soon as he's actually ready to start. I mean, I wish he could be ready for week 1, but that's just not realistic, like Tandler said.
Yeah. I mean, actually, and I asked you this, I think, I don't remember if I emailed it to you or Twittered it to you, but I asked you, how long do you think it'll take somebody to come fresh off, one team to another, learn all those calls and, the terminology and all that kind of stuff?
At center in particular.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously it's going to take a while, but I think if we move on real quick, this is our first, the first glance we got at Josh Norman at any sort of, extended time. I thought he looked great for the most part. Cooley, I listened to the first few minutes of the game on the radio, and Cooley said that there was one play where, Norman gave up some coverage and the ball just didn't go to the receiver. But other than that one play, I think that Norman was as advertised.
Yeah.
The Bills receivers
Absolutely.
Bills receivers aren't the greatest in the world, but Robert Woods is a quality guy. Norman locked him up. I did notice that they were playing press there for a little bit of the time, which is a good sign.
Yeah, they played a good amount of man the other
did.
night, which was good to see.
Yeah.
Um,
the whole secondary looked good. I was more worried, the running game the Bills had against us still seemed very productive.
Yeah.
Well, they averaged 4.5 yards per carry, which is
that jumped up because of that big touchdown run that the backups gave up. But
yeah, it did.
Yeah.
But I was overall really impressed with our starting defense, especially Preston Smith.
I mean, he had a game. Yeah.
He looks like a star in the making.
He's had a star preseason, man. I really think he's primed to have a huge breakout year. I mean, that TFL he had was the most impressive thing he's done. I mean, he got pressure on guys. But the thing that's really impressive is his run defense. And I think that's kind of flying under the radar. But he took on 2 guys, just bulled right through them and just bulldozed that running back for a 5-yard loss. So it was awesome.
Yeah. And then Breland was Breland. He's really talk about a guy who is really taking advantage of his opportunity. Because people forget. I mean, he's a quality starter now, but he was a 4th-round pick. He just played by accident. 2 years ago because of injury. I don't think anybody saw him as being a potential number 1 corner.
Yeah.
Out there, and he's getting to that point. Honestly.
I honestly think from that first game where we saw him come out there, any fan has been able to see, oh, this guy's got it. He's got that nastiness. He's got that ability to just, he's got the mentality that you really need from a corner. And then he has the athletic ability. So
Josh Norman has really challenged him, I think. Josh Norman's presence has really challenged him.
And I think in a good way, too, which is nice.
Absolutely. he's got that. He's got a lot of confidence in his abilities and talent, and that's. I mean, like you said, you need that to be a good player in the NFL. You have to believe in what you can do, and have confidence in it. So
He seems to be a complete corner too. I
Yeah.
mean, he's a good man corner. He's pretty good in the zone. He doesn't have a lot of weaknesses.
Yeah.
I think we'd be remiss real quick not mentioning Greg Toller again. He had the punt, the fumble recovery.
Yep.
The guy has outplayed all expectations. At this point, all fan expectations.
And Kyle Fuller had that interception at the end too.
Yeah.
Kendall Fuller, but
Sorry, Kendall Fuller. My bad.
Yeah, I think we've all done that a couple times now.
I know I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Fuller, I think, is a guy who we're not going to see on the field a whole lot during the season. Probably, he's going to develop. We talked about him last week.
Yeah, he'll. I'm sure he'll get out there to start getting groomed. But we have this kind of weird thing this year where we drafted a lot of talent, but none of them have to play right away because we have depth.
That's a great
well, the
thing.
thing is none of them are good enough to play right away.
Yeah, that's part of it too.
I wonder if this is a weaker draft class, honestly. We haven't seen Doxson yet. He's the key, but
I wouldn't say it that way, Steve. I think it's more with what Alex is saying. I think we're just deep, and we don't have to force them to be, huge impact players on this team yet. Like
we drafted in spots where we are deep, which is a bit unusual. But
right,
we really needed a defensive lineman, and that's kind of proven out.
Yeah.
Siggy Hood has stepped up and sort of filled the void.
And they really like what they got in Lanier. So I mean, it might work out. But I think I wouldn't classify this as a weak draft. Let's talk again, in a year.
Oh, it's too early. But I just mean, Doxson hadn't played. Sua Cravens, is not going to start, this year at least.
He's gonna, but he's gonna be on the field a lot.
He's going to contribute. I think of all of them, he's the one that's going to contribute most. Fuller's going to contribute most. Marshall's playing out. Daniels is on IR. Sudfeld is going to be, be the third stringer. We're not going to see a lot from any of these draft picks this year, and Doxson is not going to show a lot in the beginning either.
Yep. Well, I'll say what we do see from him, we probably will see next game because, let's be honest, most of the actual starters are going to sit week 4. I mean, Kirk will maybe get one series at most.
Kirk's not going to get any series.
You don't think so? Okay.
No. I bet you Sudfeld plays the entire game. I bet you Colt will be active but not play.
Wow. So you think we'll have to?
I think you're right. That's a good call, Steve.
Stick through Sudfeld all game.
Yeah, and I think Sudfeld will play the whole game, and Colt will only play if Sudfeld gets hurt.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, I mean, so that'll be out. I'm assuming if Kirk's out, all the other big starters are out.
Yeah. Well, the question would be: is Rob Kelly going to play or not?
Yeah.
He's probably himself on the roster at this point.
He's going to have to.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the problem is, we just don't have enough other running backs to not play.
Or maybe they just put in Joe Carriage to get a couple carries here and there. They take some heat off the Mac Brown and Rob Kelly.
Just punt
Or
every
Joe
time.
Carriage. That was Robbie's
on first down.
Man crush.
I need to go back and watch him on film in these preseason games. I've forgotten to do that. I want to see.
I don't think I've heard his name a single time, and
you haven't because they haven't used him much.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back and watch him just to see what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
I could see him being a practice squad guy, though.
Yeah. You want to go over the cuts real fast?
Let's go over because I know we actually did cut at least one running back already.
Kelsey Young.
Yeah, those are the ones that surprise me. I feel like you want to keep running back depth for game 4. That way, you can run out the clock, basically. And
but we have enough running backs to do that. I mean, it's not like we're going to run out of running backs. All right, cuts. I just closed the window and I hadn't printed.
While Steve reopens the window.
Because I haven't printed it. This is why I keep telling you guys, you need to print, and I just didn't have time. Okay, I have now.
Okay.
Cuts. Tackle Al Bond, tackle Cody Booth, Shiro Davis, and Ejiro Ederine, who are both linebackers. Jeremy Harris was buried on the cornerback depth. They cut him. Willie Jefferson, he was a surprise to me, the linebacker. Valdez Showers, Dez Stewart, Jarvis Young, all wide receivers. And then, as we said, the aforementioned Kelsey Young. I think Valdez Showers probably played himself off the roster on the game Friday night simply because he dropped a ball or two. Anybody surprise you guys on that list?
Nothing totally shocks me. I know we still have 5 spots left that need to be cut, roughly, or 5.
I think we're at 80. Yeah, so
if we're at 80, we need to get down to 75.
Yeah.
And there might be things like if we put what's his face on IR or Gillette. Yeah, thank you.
Well, I think but Chandler just said he might not go on IR.
Yeah,
so
that's true. But if we put somebody on IR, I think that reduces the number from 80 to 79 or whatever.
Well, we really don't know about Keith Marshall's true injury history yet, injury situation yet.
Well, and that, by the way, that was really kind of, when you watched it on replay, that was a pretty ugly injury. The way his arm just went dead on him.
Yeah. But he said, Rich said that was the most serious.
Yeah.
The only one who surprised me on this list was Jefferson, just because I know he'd done a few good things in the preseason, and he's just a victim of the numbers game. But none of the rest of these guys have. I mean, I wish them all well, of course, but none of them really made an impact. Dez Stewart, in particular, got his shot. He got his opportunities, and really didn't produce. He dropped balls, didn't look explosive. So it doesn't, and we have just a glut of wide receivers, so none of that surprised me.
Well, I mean, is there anyone who could get cut this week you think that would be a surprise? Like, to me, you see this once in a while, a guy like Perry Riley who could be a starter. They release him a week early so he can catch on with another team.
Yeah.
Anyone think that could happen with him?
I don't know. I think Paya, if there's someone that's going to be a surprise, it's going to be Paya.
Okay.
I think, and as we all say, we have no inside knowledge at all,
right.
Of course. But he's just the guy cat move. But and he really hasn't played well.
Right.
So if there's a surprise that gets cut early, I think it'll be him. My opinion.
Yeah, I want to go out on a limb and say it's going to be Corey Lichtensteiger. I mean, I know Tandler thinks that. I mean, he's got the inside source and all, but I want to say that they could go out on a limb and cut Lichtensteiger and start Spencer Long week 1 with Laval at left guard, and that allows them to have Ari Kwanjo at backing up at guard, and they'd have Brian Stork.
Long is a better center than Lichty, though.
I think at this point he is. He's younger, stronger. Lichtensteiger at this point, I think he's been under the radar pretty good for us for a couple of years, but at this point it's starting to really show, in my opinion.
By the way, you know what was really showed in preseason to me? Sean Laval really was the key to our running game getting going again. It's not stellar, don't get me wrong, but if you look at what happened last season, it's when he got hurt, everything fell apart, and now in preseason we're seeing he missed one game, had issues, now he's back, things are going good.
Well, and also, Trent Williams has not played before the third game too. Right. So, I mean, you can't ignore the fact that, the best left tackle in the league is not playing.
That's true. And that's fair. That's another, key. I think if you put our starters out there, we'll be in good shape, at least in terms of blocking for the run. The running backs, that's still a question, but we'll be able to block for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my bold prediction. I think Lichtensteiger out, Spencer Long taking his place.
Okay. Well, as long as we're talking about that, the poll question this week, let's do that real fast.
Yeah.
The poll question was, the poll question was on Brian Stork. The question was this: new Redskin Brian Stork has roster competition and a concussion history. How many games will he start this season? The choices here were 16, meaning he'll just be great all year. Between 10 and 15. Between 1 and 9, and then 0. He's going to be a second string guy all year. What do you guys think?
He'll be starter by, I'm going to say, what was the options again?
Well, we didn't, I did number of games because, if you start by, he could get injured.
Options.
Yeah.
Right.
So 16 games, between 10 and 15 games, between 1 game and 9 games, and then 0, he's not going to start at all.
Between 1 and 9, he'll be starting
half a year.
No, I don't even think it's going to be that long. I want to say it's going to be like maybe 3 games max. I think they're going to work his way into it pretty quickly. As soon as he starts to pick up everything, he'll be the starter. I think it's going to be quicker than you think.
Okay. Alex?
Well, I'm going to actually go one step further. I think he will play on the first game he'll start will be October 9th versus the Ravens.
October 9th.
Yep.
Okay, well there you go.
Getting specific.
Well, it's my
Yeah.
birthday, so I'm just going to,
I did not vote in the poll, but if I voted, I would have voted between 1 and 9 like Robbie did, because I think there's going to be a combination of it's going to take him a few weeks to start, and I think he's going to get injured at some point. He's going to have to sit out a game or two.
Yeah.
Because that's just been his history. So
well,
I think
and
between those two
it's
things,
the NFL. It happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of these guys are Iron Man, like the John Janssens of the world.
Sure.
But this guy is one of them. So
Yep.
That's the poll for this week. Do we want to do any more of a preview of the next game, which is Tampa?
I mean we
we
kind
kinda
of talked
covered
about
it.
it. You're not going to have many starters playing, right? So that kind of makes it tough. Like what else are we going to say other than maybe somebody will show something?
Yeah, I guess you want
Great
to.
insight.
Yeah.
Someone will show something.
I mean, I think it'll be an entertaining game because this is the last game a lot of these guys will even ever play in football.
Sure.
Some of them are done after this, so I think you'll see a lot of guys kind of leaving it out on the field just to, as the one last stand to make the team or have basically audition for another team kind of thing. So I always enjoy watching this game because it's going to be. It may not be the best quality, but guys are going to be playing really hard.
It's guys you're never going to see again. Yeah, it's fun I always watch the fourth game. It's fun to watch for sure.
I'll see them again because some of them might make our arena football team, and I have my season
maybe.
tickets.
Good
I'll probably
point.
see them there.
And just real quick, Joe Theismann, stop talking about Tressway. Every time Joe Theismann on these podcasts says Tressway is great, that's when
shakes it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So just Joe, if you're listening to this, and I know you are,
if we're ranting on Joe, I have another thing. But yeah,
please go ahead, rant on Joe.
You're going to say about his name pronunciation, aren't you?
Yes, you've been covering this. You've been involved with this team for 30 years, my whole life. How can you not pronounce these guys' names right? You're there all the time. Get a pronouncer. Matt Ioannidis, not Ioannidis.
Iodinus.
Yeah. I think that's his favorite way to go. It's Ioannidis. Very easy to just Google these guys and say, how is he pronounced in college? Okay. And he's done it to like 6 players. It drives me nuts.
There was one guy this last game that he pronounced or just changed his last name. I can't remember who it was.
Oh, yeah.
I want to say it was he said Deshaun Johnson or something like that.
Well, he does that a lot. I think he might be the captain of the Kirk Cousins fan club.
He does say Kirk Cousins.
Or Brian Orapko.
Yeah, that was more of a Vinny Serrato thing. But yeah, he was involved in that.
There were tons of announcers that said it like that.
Yeah,
Even
that was not
Brian
nearly
Billick.
It was not nearly just Theismann and Vinny that said Orapko.
Yeah, but come on, Joe. You went to Notre Dame. You should be smarter than that. You should, get pronounced.
Antonio Moss.
Yeah,
that wasn't Theismann though that did that.
I know. That's just a favorite of mine.
Santonio Moss.
I think they need to redo the whole, play-by-play for the CSN broadcast at this point.
I'm going to say what I'm about to say very respectfully, and I mean it as such.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not being facetious here. But Sonny Jurgensen in the booth, we love him.
Terrible.
It's a history, but it's an embarrassment at this point. I think for everyone's sake, it's probably time for him to go. It's just it's not good anymore.
Yeah,
He sounds like he doesn't know where he is sometimes.
Do you guys remember
he's
Sam
too
was
old.
like this 2 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sam
Yes,
he's been gone more than 2 years though.
Yeah, it has been more than 2 years.
It
But
has
I mean,
been more
your
than 2
point,
years.
Alex, is it's the same thing that kind of happened.
Yeah.
To Sam, and I mean, some of the stuff that Sonny says now just doesn't even really make sense.
Mm-hmm.
When he chimes in, and I hate to see it happen, but it's going to happen to everybody. He's a legend. He's a Hall of Famer. We love him. But I think it's time for him to gracefully step aside.
You know what?
Hang it up.
I would say let him sit in the booth the rest of his life. He doesn't need to talk.
Yeah.
We can find somebody else. He can just hang out there with Cooley, eating pizza and smoking a cigar.
Honestly, they don't even really need a third voice in the booth. I mean, Cooley can do it.
Yeah.
You know?
He can handle it.
Yeah, I agree.
And they have Doc chimes in, with the sideline stuff, and
I
so
love Doc's sideline stuff. He's awesome at that.
Oh, he is. He's good at it. Yeah, we gotta get Doc back on the show. I thought he was great.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and we can go into the whole history of Doc coming on the show as our first official interview someday.
And
Because there was a lot to that backstory that might be entertaining.
Speaking of announcers, before we go, I was kind of disappointed it wasn't Chick Hernandez with Theismann again this time.
Yeah.
Chick's really good at it. He's really good at it, but the Kenny Albert guy, I don't know, something about him is just so weird.
Is it his voice? It sounds like this.
Yeah,
he looks like Beaker from from the Muppets.
Honeydew or something. The professor, but he or the Swedish Chef. Pork.
Right.
No, but he looks like I don't know, what's his name? Ferris Bueller, Matthew Broderick. He looks like a Matthew Broderick on a late Saturday night, and he's been drinking
Matthew
a lot.
Matthew Broderick on a bender.
Yeah, he looks like Matthew Broderick on a rough night, who's had a lot to drink.
Yeah.
Oh man, we've really gone off the rails here right now, folks.
Yeah,
We're having fun.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about the whole what is wrong with announcing these days. That's a topic for a whole show at some point.
Well, I think Clinton Portis is basically, in long we're talking announcement, he's kind of like in training camp, like announcer training camp right now, because he does these interviews. He's getting better at it.
He was so bad last year. He had nowhere to go but up.
He's better than who, Robbie?
He's much better than Ken Harvey.
Oh yeah.
If you remember what Ken Harvey was doing, he looked like he was lost out there to me.
Well, and Ken used to do those hits on the Washington Post video thing, remember? Right. And those were terrible too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a reason Ken isn't in Washington media anymore, probably.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up. Real quick, I want to point out we got one of our first positive reviews ever on iTunes. So, folks, I want to thank Daryl Throne, who wrote the review, saying that we're amazing. Other people, please put out positive reviews or negative reviews. Just write something. I don't care what you star it.
Feedback is feedback.
Feedback is feedback, and we like feedback. Other than that, you know where to find us on thehogsty.com and where we are on iTunes. Hope you all enjoy week 4 of the preseason, and on to the regular season we go.
Bye.